Hi, it's me, and welcome to another Limbus Company new ID overview. This week's update brought with it the Intervallo 7.5-2 Nocturnal Sweeping event. Along with it, we also have two brand new triple lot IDs in Heishou Pack Malbranch Ryōshū, who can be extracted and can be sharded next week, and Heishou Pack Malbranch Outis, who can be purchased from the event shop for 1,000 event currency. I always recommend playing enough to get the shop ID, but since the banner is only a singular ID, I recommend just waiting to shard the Ryoshu ID until next week. I put both of them in my company in case you want to use them before then, and so you don't need to spend 120 pulls on her like I felt obligated to do on new releases. These new IDs just happen to bring along two brand new statuses to highlight their reliance on both speed and rupture. The first of which is Strider Mount, an effect that gives 5 haste for 3 turns. You would think an effect like this would be broken on an ID who relies on speed for the majority of their conditionals. And you'd be completely correct. This by itself enables the IDs to be incredibly powerful even outside their own archetype. The second is Deathrite Haste, an effect that always sets its value to 3 every time it is inflicted, like Echoes of the Manor. When a unit who has 10 plus speed hits a unit with this effect, you inflict 1 rupture count. Now sadly, the only units to gain this amount of speed consistently are these two, but don't worry about that. And once the effect wears off, they take gluttony damage equal to their rupture, which would be crazy if gluttony was a good damage type. I'm going to talk about the passives of both units right now since they are both very simple. Ryoshu's passive is just a flat 5% damage boost both when she has Strider and when the target has Deathrite, so it isn't very interesting or important, but it is easy to take advantage of. Outis' passive lets her deal 5% more damage against enemies with Deathrite for every point of Strider she has, which is equally unimpressive. Their support passives are both very generally useful, with Ryoshu's just giving 2 haste to your fastest unit when activated, and Outis giving 1 haste, but also a 10% damage boost against enemies with Rupture. That said, these IDs are good enough that you will certainly want to use them in battle anyways. Now, Heishou Pack Malbranch Outis is who I believe to be the stronger of the two IDs from this update, which is nice because she's the one who you can get for free. To start off, both of these IDs want to have Strider as often as possible, which is convenient because Outis' counter will always give her 3. Partial Heishou Mutation is a 5-12 rolling / gluttony clashable counter with a single coin that can become up to a 7-14 if Outis is fast enough compared to her target. I'm glad they learned their lesson from Firefist Gregor and that this is a reasonable roll for a clashable counter, even if it does still outclash her skill 1 before any conditionals. But you should be able to see why the 5 haste from Strider is so important. Despite being a Rupture ID, the majority of her conditionals activate based on speed. To top it off, any defensive skill that is Gluttony is insanely good in Rupture, and it also inflicting 1 Rupture count means that using it makes it net neutral for the count. It should be noted, though, that this ID is incredibly frail, having a low HP stat and the lowest possible defense level of any ID. The real reason you need Strider is to improve her clashing so that getting hit isn't going to be as big of a potential issue. Blink Step is a 4-10 rolling / sloth skill with 2 coins that can become up to a 4-14 if the target has both enough Rupture and is slow enough compared to Outis. Clashing at a 10 by default is not great, which is why it is so important to have the extra haste from Strider. The coin power from the Rupture conditional being on use also helps to maintain it even if she happens to kill their entire Rupture stack. This skill also has the most important conditional in her kit. The second coin can re-roll if she's at 10 plus speed, and while Strider makes her speed range into a minimum of 9 to 12, that isn't a guaranteed activation. But this additional coin rolls 13 at minimum, 19 when under full conditionals. Having the potential damage of a skill 2 on her skill 1 is insanely strong, and since the conditional is tied to speed, you don't even need to build a full Rupture team to take full advantage of it. Perforating Kill is, first off, a skill without an on-kill conditional, which is really disappointing from a theming perspective, but it's a 4-16 rolling / gluttony skill with 2 coins that can become up to a 4-20 if the target has enough Rupture and Outis is fast enough compared to them. I want to quickly mention that 4 Rupture is a really easy conditional to reach, especially in a Rupture team. Also, the unopposed attack conditional on it can be a little misleading. This does not apply on hit if the attack was unopposed, but rather will apply 1 Rupture count before the first hit. That being said, it still makes the attack count positive overall. This is probably the weakest skill in her kit, since the 10 speed conditional on it is just a damage boost instead of a reroll, but it does allow her to gain 1 more haste, which prevents the awkward situation where Strider is boosting you, but you roll a 9 from being at minimum speed, so it's still important to have it as an option. Curse Writ Butcher Blade is a 5-17 rolling / gloom skill with 3 coins that can become a 5-26 if the target has enough Rupture and Outis is fast enough compared to them. The Rupture conditional on the skill is much harder to hit than the others, but the speed one is just as easy, and the skill has a big damage conditional that factors in both speed and enemy Rupture into it. It is also another way to gain Strider, and is the only skill where I would say that you shouldn't replace with a defensive skill as a result. When used at 10+ speed and as an unopposed attack, this skill is potentially Rupture count positive by 4 due to inflicting Deathrite as well as 2 extra Rupture count before an unopposed attack. On top of that, its damage will skyrocket thanks to the additional gluttony damage it deals, but even without a proper Rupture setup, this skill is terrifyingly strong, and I would call it one of the strongest skills in the entire game. Because yes, the 3rd coin can reroll, and even inflicts 3 Deathrite on reroll. The roll of this skill is 21 by default, or 32 with maximum conditionals, which is one of the highest rolling hits a skill 3 can have. If all that wasn't enough, she also has great ego synergy. First off, she perfectly fuels Sun Shower, an ego that isn't Rupture related except for the corrosion, but has an insanely high base roll that makes it the perfect emergency clashing tool. It also inflicts Bind to more consistently activate your speed conditionals against enemies who might happen to be a little faster, and on top of that, it allows Heishou Outis to basically become a poise unit, and allows her to be used effectively in a poise team as well as in Rupture. The fact that she generates Gluttony actually makes her a solid off-meta unit in poise as well. Ebony Stem turns all of Outis' count neutral skills into count positive thanks to its passive, and even allows her to inflict Bind more consistently gain her coin power conditionals. Pretty much all of her good ego are Pierce, so the 10% Pierce damage boost is still useful on her, and Ebony Stem itself as a skill is insanely strong, being 7 attack weight and mass inflicting Gluttony Fragility. She doesn't perfectly fuel it herself, but when paired with Ryōshū, the pair of them can, so I would say it's a no-brainer to take this. And while 2 Pathos Mathos Rupture infliction is tiny, the fact that it is a Rupture skill at all means it has some application here. Plus, since you will be attempting to never let Outis get hit, you can hopefully make use of the 30% extra damage from its passive. Moving on to Ryōshū now, you'll begin to see that these 2 IDs are incredibly similar, but Ryōshū herself has more of a focus on clashing rather than using unopposed attacks. Strider, Unleashed, is a 5-13 rolling / gluttony clashable counter with a single coin that can become a 7-15 if she is fast enough compared to her target. Aside from the 1 additional coin power that this skill has by default, this skill is identical to the one Outis has, and so its use case remains the same. Use it whenever you don't have Strider, and the skill it is replacing is not her skill 3. Blink Step is a 3-11 rolling / lust skill with 2 coins that can become up to a 3-15 if the target has enough Rupture, and if Ryōshū is fast enough compared to them. While I do believe that Outis has the better ID overall, this version of Blink Step is objectively the more powerful one. Not only does it inflict 1 Rupture count on winning a clash, and inflicts Rupture count on the second hit, as well as the reuse hit, meaning it's at worst count neutral, and the reason why Ryōshū is more focused on clashing. And while Ryōshū is only slightly less frail, making her clashing better means that the reuse roll is also better, being a 15 at minimum and a 21 with full conditionals, which means this damage rivals that of some ID's skill 3s. I would not hesitate to call it one of the best, if not the best, skill 1 in the entire game. If her skill 1 is objectively better than that of Outis, her skill 2 is objectively worse. As Written is a 4-16 rolling / gluttony skill with 2 coins that can become a 4-20 if the target has enough Rupture, and Ryōshū is fast enough compared to them. It has a much better damage conditional since it actually has 2 damage conditionals, adding up to a max of 50% and 80% on the hits respectively, and since she gains the haste from the skill on use, it is technically more consistent at allowing her to be over 10 speed. However, not only does she need to be at 10 plus speed, but going Rupture count neutral with this skill requires a clash win. Being Rupture count neutral is still great for a Rupture ID, it just does make it slightly weaker than Outis' overall. Don't get me wrong though, it is still a fantastic skill. I'll Gut You with a Cursing Graith Blade is a mouthful and also a 5 to 17 rolling / pride skill with 3 coins that can become a 5 to 26 if the target has enough Rupture and Ryōshū is fast enough compared to them. This skill once again becomes easily count positive if it both wins a clash and she has 10 plus speed thanks to Deathrite. In terms of overall effectiveness, it does outdo Outis' just a little bit due to having an additional damage conditional on the reusable coin, and inflicting 1 more Rupture count overall, but the skills are incredibly similar, and the fact that one wants to win a clash while the other wants you to go unopposed does make them play very differently. You can still use this skill to gain Strider, and that is better than replacing it with her defense skill, even if you don't have the 10 speed conditional. And that last coin is devastating, hitting 21 without conditionals and 32 with them. The main reason I think Outis is a better ID overall is because Ryoshu's synergistic ego are not nearly as good for this ID. She doesn't perfectly feel any of them, and the only one that actually plays into the kit of this ID is Red Eyes, which to be fair is a really good ego for this ID. It inflicts Bind and Slash Fragility, both things that this ID can take advantage of, and the passive allows her to continue inflicting Bind whenever she wins a clash, which is always a really helpful effect to have. But this is basically the only ego that this ID gets anything out of, except for a big number to win a clash with. These are 2 of the most solid units if your goal is not to team build, but just to use units who are generally good, but team building for them is actually more interesting than just put them in Rupture, too. First off, since Deathrite requires a 10 plus speed unit to take advantage of it, these are the only 2 units who can consistently activate it. There are some very fast Rupture IDs, but they usually barely miss the mark, or 10 speed is close to their maximum possible speed. So, the strongest single ID to pair them with is W Corp Yi Sang, who is both great for Rupture and has access to Crow's Eye View, which boosts the speed of the entire party by 3 for a turn, allowing the faster Rupture units like Cinq-Morceaux and the Deviats, and sometimes himself, to be able to trigger Deathrite. That said, any Yi Sang with synergistic Sin affinities works really well in case you're missing W Corp. Solemn Lament, Spice Bush, Ring, and even weaker IDs such as LCE Ego, Diechi, and Seven can all be really good partners for these IDs. You will need at least 1 ID with a Rat skill to feel Crow's Eye View, however, and there are only 4 Rupture IDs who can do that. I don't recommend Dead Rabbit's Morceaux as a partner, so your strongest 2 options for that case are Deviat Sinclair and 7 Heathcliff. Both have their flaws, but are overall very solid Rupture units. The standard Rupture core is always great support as well. IDs like Deviat Rodian, Cinq-Morceaux, Lantern Dawn, Talisman Sinclair, and 7 Faust are great to bring along to help build your Rupture stack. And thanks to Outis becoming a Poise ID after using Sunshower, there are other IDs that work well with her specifically. The most important one is Blade Lineage Faust equipped with Thoracalgia to help with preventing Outis from having to reuse Sunshower in order to maintain her Poise count. And since you're bringing a Blade Lineage ID, then Blade Lineage Yi Sang and Blade Lineage Morceaux are also good allies. Plus, Blade Lineage Yi Sang has Wrath, meaning you can feel Crow's Eye View very easily. If you want to go super hard with it, you can even bring Blade Lineage Dawn, though she does prioritize giving her other Blade Lineage allies her poise. And Pequod Ishmael works really well too. While Assist Attack will eat at your Rupture count, being able to use a skill 1 that is as strong as the typical skill 2 is an incredibly ability that Outis does have thanks to this ability. And that's about all I have to say about the new identities of Intervalo 7.5-2 Nocturnal Sweeping. It's so cool to finally have proper furries represented in this game, and the fact that they are incredibly strong IDs is really nice. I honestly expected them to be more powerful than they are, which is a good thing. Also, I would have loved to talk about other ways to spread haste to other team members, but pretty much all of them are on other Outis IDs. But anyways, thank you for watching. You should like and subscribe as it helps me out, and let me know what you think about these new IDs with a comment. Feel free to add me if you want to borrow them before getting Ryōshū, though I would recommend getting Outis if you can, since she's free. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll hope to see you again soon.